Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of RVN Television, The Advocates. Today at RVN Television, it is Women in Business Day, and I can't think of a better equipped, better experienced woman to talk about women in business than our own Lisa Manyoky, who is one of the Advocates hosts. Yes. Welcome to the program, Lisa, as a kind of a guest and host. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I've frequently said that if we as a society have been treating women the way we treated men from the very beginning, we'd probably be streaming this program from Mars. But
Why do you say
behind
that?
because we have just never really fully utilized that pool of talent. I mean, we'd be hundreds of years ahead of where we are if we had treated women the way we treat men. Hoping that the light has dawned and we're heading into that kind of a world finally. But you tell me. I mean, I think I want to start. I don't know. It's going to be your turn in a minute. But there are a whole bunch of things. There are a whole bunch of things I want to talk about, like glass ceilings and limitations on women and self-defeating. The kind of self-defeating prophecy that people get, that little gremlin in people's heads,
Sure.
I think. And I want to talk about, I think, a lot of the advice you might have to offer for some of the women watching our program and how they might be able to overcome some of that. But let's start with that fundamental question. Is femininity a weakness that has to be overcome, or is it a tool that you can use to get what you want?
Wait a minute, there's two different words there.
Feminism, which is not, I meant femininity.
Is a movement. Femininity is
the way,
a trait.
A behavior trait.
Sure.
Okay, talk about that. I want to talk about that.
Well, I don't think it's a problem. I mean, listen, we can do things you guys can't do. We can grow a baby.
I've heard that.
I mean, we still need you to do that. But my point is there's fundamental differences between a man and a woman. That's fact. Mm-hmm. Okay? So we might as well use our best assets to our greatest advantage.
And that's everybody. I mean, women are no different from, it's not really, in fact, maybe the fact that we consider them different has been part of the problem all along. They're people. Competency is more important than just can you do the job is really all that matters. Do I have that right?
Can you do the job? Yes, being capable is important, male or female, but capable at something that you're ideally fit to do or that you want to do.
You use that word fit.
I love that word.
Yeah,
fit.
I know. So talk about that word fit.
One of my
What does that
favorite
mean?
words because I say that everybody ultimately needs to find out they're fit with people, with their profession, with the location where they choose to live, their life choices. Fit is essential. Without it, you're uncomfortable or relying on tactics to camouflage or suppress or elevate in a way that doesn't have integrity with who you are.
Okay, and fit is something that you can control if you understand it. That really is kind of the business that you're in, isn't that right?
Yes, yes. And I'd say that evolved from lessons that I learned as a young woman. Now, first of all, I was raised by a mom who ran a school bus company. Mm-hmm. That was a typically male industry when she was running it, and she was fearless. So I was raised with a parent who showed me that it's okay to be fearless. In an entrepreneurial world, I wasn't afraid to be in business.
Your mom was a single mom?
She was.
She was, and you were a single mom.
I was.
And that means that you really had to play, both of you really had to play both roles at different points in your lives.
Yes.
And in addition to that, you needed to bring in the bread, bring in the bacon.
That's right,
okay.
Because when my former spouse left, there was no warning. So overnight, I became fiscally and custodially responsible for a 6, 9, and a 10-year-old. That was a lot.
And that's a big burden that, well, I don't even want to say a burden, it's an opportunity that you rose to.
Yes, opportunity, sure. In hindsight, it looks like opportunity, but at the time it felt like burden. I mean, it was a big bite. Although I do remember one of the best lessons I got during that time was my kids' room, their bedroom was hot. I mean, it was hot. And they needed an air conditioner to supplement the central air. So I went out and I got an air conditioner because they needed it then. And
So you found yourself getting in your car, going to Lowe's, buying an air conditioner.
Got an air conditioner. I mean, it was you know, it was a window unit, no
Yeah,
big
yeah.
deal.
Sure.
Take it out of the box, read the instructions, and while I'm in the middle of this installation process, I got a phone call from a colleague who said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm installing an air conditioner." He said, "Lisa, I know you're a single woman out there. Don't ever tell a man you're doing that." And I said, "What?" Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
It's an air conditioner. I'm reading instructions. I'm putting a box in a square, you know, and pulling some little accordion plastic shields.
Yeah.
He said, "They don't need to know that you can do that." And I thought, well, that's odd.
Really?
Why? What's the big deal? It wasn't like I was doing gene therapy or anything. I mean, I was putting an air conditioner in a window.
Huh.
But his point was interesting, so I held on to it. And then when my spouse did leave, because he was really pretty absent, I went to go see a marriage counselor for about 7 months myself. Number one, to figure out how a smart woman like myself could miss the cues that this was coming. And number two, to cope with my own losses. The counselor who I said told me that it was really important for a man to feel needed. Not needy,
But needed.
but needed. And in combination with that comment from my colleague about the air conditioner, what I learned is that just because I could do something didn't mean that I should do everything.
Okay, so now let's talk about that as an adaptation.
That's
I mean,
right.
And there's a lesson in that.
There is.
Talk about that.
Personally, I had to delegate. I mean, I had 3 kids who were athletes, musicians, and kids who were also coping with losses. I wanted to make certain that I wasn't tainting their perspective with my, well, at the time, anger. I was pretty angry.
Sure, I'll bet.
So I wanted to put my stuff somewhere else so that they could cope in their own ways that suited them best. But it was important that I understood that delegation was critical, or else I would have imploded from demand.
Really?
I mean, there was a lot to do. Parenting is really ideally a 2-parent job.
Sure.
It is. That's ideal. So I didn't have that. But if I insisted on doing everything myself, I would have lost my mind.
You would have
And my
popped the cork,
sanity, you know, and weight, you name it.
Okay.
So I learned that I had to delegate. That is a really excellent trait and practice to bring into business.
There's a lesson in that. And
There is.
I do want to point out at the same time you were coping with this major change in your relationship and in your life and your relationship with your children.
Yes.
You were also building a business of your own that has grown into something called presence intelligence.
That's right. At the time, my business was, let's see, probably about 16 years old. So I'd been in business for my entire career by myself. I mean, I was a consultant. I liked doing things with a certain degree of freedom. It suited me. So it fit my style, fit my behavioral style, it fit my professional style. It worked really well. But because I had this blend of professionalism and personalism, in other words, my clients and I often became pals. I cared very much about them. And when I ended up having this sudden life quake, they were really cooperative.
Oh, great. They were there for you.
They were there for me. So that blend of care and regard, professionalism, you know, the right kind of boundary, it was a real important blend for me that paid great dividends.
That's great.
Meaning that there was a return on my investment in them, which was really positive.
Oh, okay, so what's interesting to me about this, I mean, you're talking about a life that came off the tracks, no warning.
Right.
All of a sudden it was just
Overnight.
the way it was, and that was it, overnight.
Yep.
And but of course, all your circumstances stayed the same. So the bills kept coming in,
That's right.
of course, and the kids still needed to be taken all these different places. They were kids,
Right.
after all, and so they needed to be raised. And you were pretty much on your own. And eventually, you ended up building this thing called presence intelligence.
Right.
And the reason why I want to talk about that is because I know everything you experienced as a woman
Sure.
ultimately contributed to presence intelligence.
Right.
What presence intelligence is today
That's right.
is a result of all the things you've had to experience in your life.
Sure.
So start by telling us what presence intelligence is, and then let's talk about how a woman builds a life in business from her experiences.
Well, presence intelligence was most assuredly born from a lifetime of experiences. And it defined, it's the ability to align the best parts of who you are on the inside with what you project on the outside in a way that has integrity. I mean, who you are is who you are, and you know that better than anybody. However, there's a lot of noise sometimes from other people, authority figures, parents, maybe teachers, and even circumstances that come your way that you didn't ask for. They contribute to who you become and shape maybe the decisions that you make. They might not be yours, though.
Okay.
They might just be the result of fallout. So your job as having presence intelligence is important to understand, who am I in here, up here, and does it match what I'm putting out there? Because when there's alignment, then opportunity appears and the right people show up.
And you fit in with all that.
That's right.
That's where fit comes from. So fit isn't like pegboard type fit. Fit is an active process of becoming the person you need to become in order to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish.
Right, and the person who you want to become, too.
Who you want to become, because you have to be happy in that skin.
There has to be an element of desire. Look, my father was absentee as well. He wanted me to be a doctor so he could brag that his kid was a doctor.
His kid was a doctor,
but he was
right.
absent. I didn't think he had the right to decide. So I went to art school. How's that for a polar opposite?
In your face.
Little streak of defiance that suited me well, but it was also a choice that enabled me to have the freedom to be available when I was single parenting and running a business and doing what I needed to do with my clients on the West Coast at midnight or 4 a.m. if need be, whenever I needed to do it.
Right.
So I found a profession that suited me, that was in line with my personal demands, and as a result, there wasn't much stress except everyday stresses and maybe the stress from just generally that comes with single parenting and being a solopreneur.
Sure, that's it.
That's normal.
We need to take a break. I'm loving this conversation because we're talking about how you build a life. Not just necessarily a woman's life, but a life in general, and that authentic path of experience through everything you've had to deal with to become the person you are, to build the business you're currently offering to the world. We want to talk a little bit more about that. So when we come back on this special edition of The Advocates, we'll be talking with Lisa Manyoky about more about presence intelligence and how it might be able to help women in business.
Yep.
And so we'll be right back after this. Welcome back to a very special edition of The Advocates. My name is Al Cini, and I'm joined by fellow advocate Lisa Manyoky. And we're talking today, it's a special day really here at RVN Television. It's Women in Business, series of programs that have been produced essentially to educate women on the options that might be available to them and provide them with tips that they might be able to use to become more successful in their own lives, to live more successful lives, and become more successful in business. And so Lisa, I want to pick up on a little something I heard you say in the beginning, and that is at one point, a gentleman colleague said, Lisa, you may not want to tell people that you installed your own air conditioner. Now, I know, and the reason why I want to kind of focus on that is because you also mentioned that in order to be successful, you have to spend a little bit of time tuning out the noise that is going to say things to you. I mean, things that are going to be said that you might take too seriously and that you can't afford to take too seriously. Was that noise or was that good advice?
Oh, well, there was a lot of noise. I mean, I had people telling me what I should do, but what I should do is what I didn't want to do. And I had terms for my choices. I wanted most of all to be a wife and a mother. Actually, a mother and a wife. You know, motherhood was the axis up around which I sculpted a life. I wanted to choose a career that would give me the flexibility to parent in a certain way, which was hands-on. I didn't want to do daycare. So if I had gone to medical school, which I had the grades to do, I mean, I was a really bright student, then I would have been anchored to a pager at the time when pagers were relevant, right? They're not anymore.
Sure.
Or I would have had to be beholden to somebody else's schedule or patience. My kids first, that didn't work for me. But being a designer and working from home, well, that gave me options.
Which gave you the flexibility to to fill the role you wanted. Well, the number one role was parent, mother.
Yes,
and
I
you
wanted to be a
mom.
I did.
And that was critical, and obviously you did a great job. You have 3 great kids.
I
so,
do.
Yeah, congratulations.
I do.
You really do.
They're
And
wonderful.
I mean, for anybody out there who maybe hasn't had the experience of raising children, it's no mean feat to raise kids, especially these days when there's so many choices thrown at them from all over the place.
No, and when I was having kids, I remember one of the big issues for women was, you can have it all. I don't believe that. I really don't. I think you can have what you want, but is that all? So can you have a career and be a parent? Sure, so long as your choices are agreeable. If you wanted to parent the way I did, then having a job that took you all over the world with a lot of travels would have posed conflict. So you can have all, whatever, however you define all.
But you've got to make at some point, you can't be in 2 places at once. There's
course
certain
not.
elements of physics
That's right.
that you can't deny.
Right.
And so you can't fight gravity. You can't fight, I mean,
No.
there's some things that just have to happen if
Sure.
you want something to happen.
If you want to be employed in an organization, you have to show up.
Yeah, you do. And that means, and if they send you somewhere, that means you have to go. And all those
Sure.
things mean that you might have to give up something that's important to you.
Right.
And you didn't want to make that choice.
I
so-
didn't, so I was fortunate in that I was a teenager when I knew what my priority would be and was able to make choices as I grew older. So I didn't get locked into something and then have to undergo this huge transition. I had figured it out. And as a result, my professional life, it still suits me. I mean, I'm still on my own, but I've learned to delegate. Look, I don't do accounting. My accountant does accounting.
Your accountant.
You know, I don't
Delegate.
do certain parts of my career. I could, but if I did everything, then something else would suffer.
Right.
So I know what my priorities are. So noise from who in my past said you should do this or you'd be ideal for this. Well, I know because I'm okay with listening to myself. That takes courage, takes commitment, and sometimes it takes loss. And sometimes you have to, in order to pursue what you want, leave behind things that you may have had.
That you may have had. And that, you know,
Sure.
that there's a piece of advice in that too, and that is, I mean, anybody in business is going to have to make compromises, I think, but in particular, a woman in business who's going to have to play all those roles is going to find a more difficult balancing act than men in business, I think, might have to. I think there's a difference there.
A different balancing act. So, you know, if for example, I remember a woman who was a physician was told, are you going to have babies? Because if you are, well, and there was no comment, but the implication was, you're not going to get this job because we need you here. So I'm good. I made that choice, but I encourage women when they are making their professional path or choosing it or altering it, that it's in line with where they want to go. Because when there's a conflict, that conflict spills out into every other dimension of life, even the ones that are working well.
Sure, absolutely. And this is probably a good point at which you can talk to us about your 4th child, presence intelligence. I mean, because that's a nurturing job too, if you think about it.
It is.
You've created something. So let's talk about that creation process and what kind of problem you're trying to solve in the world, and how could women maybe use that?
Well, I went to art school, like I said, so I'm a designer. And because I kept my clients for so long, I would sit around so many conference room tables and observe behavior, and I'd be thinking, wow, that's just not working. So even if I were making their products and services look good, it didn't matter if the personalities were oppressive or trouble or if the teams were dysfunctional. So I immersed myself in the coaching world, which was a really great way for me to have some company as a single parent with 3 young kids who was working alone. And I have, I think, now 8 different coaching type certifications. But I found that from observing behavior, even at conference room tables or when I was going through litigation for divorce in court, there was this need for this service where people looked inside and made sure that what was on the outside was in line with it. And that's not just a wardrobe and attire or makeup and hair. We're talking speaking, writing, your career choice, your health, your finances, the people in your life, your character, and how you interact with others. Those are the 9 categories that comprise presence intelligence, because you can be a really, really great writer or a really great speaker, but not play well with others, then you have a problem. It doesn't matter if you're really good in some areas, but poor in others that your profession needs, that your family needs, that you need, because then one deficit could infect all of your strengths.
It's important. I think the gift of presence intelligence, those 9 categories, isn't so much, it's not an assessment, which I think is very important to make sure people understand that. It's a coaching platform that identifies 9 levers that you can adjust in your life to become more effective or to get what you want. And that, to me anyway, it's part of your journey, and all the adjustments you had to make in yourself in order to be successful are mirrored in this thing that you've built called presence intelligence.
Right. Now, for example, when I was in court, I couldn't come in there screaming and frustrated and angry and crying. What good would that do?
Actually, you could do that.
I wanted to.
A lot of people do that,
so
but it doesn't work for you.
It did well. It wouldn't have worked for me in terms of an outcome.
Sure.
So that's where I had to employ some tactics. So when you talk about levers, there are some instances when, we need to dress maybe a little differently than we normally would in order to affect a certain result. Court being one of them, maybe a job interview. However, if tactical measures depart too far from who you are, then there's a disconnect. And if you'll feel it, and as a result, so will others. So the sweet spot between who you are and what you project, that's something that everybody needs to find, men and women.
That's, it's important too, because you're talking about a comfort zone. I mean, you're defining the comfort zone of a person in terms of 9 areas of flexibility.
Yes.
Really, because a comfort zone isn't necessarily a slot that you fall into. You have room in a comfort zone.
You do.
You can make adjustments in different directions to be more effective at what it is you're trying to accomplish.
But ideally, and this is the ideal of presence intelligence, is that you find the blend of all of those 9 categories that's in line with who you are. Okay? For example, a person who is in debt is going to behave very differently than a person who is not. Right? So there are some arenas that you'd ideally like to, be proficient at. Financial health, physical health, mental health, But when it comes to speaking and writing, are they as critical as those arenas? Well, they're different. In other words, it depends.
Yeah, sure. So listen, I love this because, and when we get to the end of the program, you're going to tell everybody where they can go to learn more about presence intelligence, because I think it's a terrific gift to the coaching world that what normally might be a pretty ambiguous conversation where we exchange our feelings is all of a sudden made into a structure that helps us be more mindful of and manage more effectively the 9 aspects of our lives that we can adjust to be more effective. And what I love about it is, in particular for women, is it's developed by a woman who's walked the talk of a woman throughout her whole adult and childhood, throughout her whole life.
Yes, and I've had to take on some tasks that might have stereotypically been dubbed a man's role. I ran my business as well as conducted it and participated in it. So I was the CEO and the designer, I mean, to do both, I was the dad and the mom. To do both roles required different behaviors.
We talked a little bit before the program too about femininity and masculinity being a spectrum, not just a choice, but a range. And there are elements of feminine and masculine traits that somebody can adapt in order to be a more authentic version of themselves in whatever situation they find themselves in.
Absolutely. I mean, look, if I was just a pushover all the time with my kids, then they would have been running the household, right? But I had to be disciplinarian, which when you think of, father, mother, who's the disciplinarian, who's the boss, who's the breadwinner? I was all of that. I had to be the disciplinarian, the breadwinner, the comforter, the love, the tender one, the cook, the cleanup committee. That was a lot. But when you think of stereotypical masculine and feminine roles, I had to find that. Same as in business. A masculine leader might be regarded as commanding or authoritative. Well, a woman can do that too.
Absolutely.
But if too much of anything, whether man or woman, is too much.
It just stands
gonna be a
out, and
problem.
these are adjustments you can make. Presence
That's right.
intelligence helps you make those adjustments. I was raised by a single mom, by the way, so in my opinion anyway, single moms tend to make pretty good kids. For a second opinion, maybe one of these days we'll have your kids on the program and they can...
That would be wonderful.
I think that would be a lot
I
of
would
fun.
even trust them to say something I'd be proud for them to share, which is really confident.
I'll tell you the truth, I think they'd probably do you proud. But,
so.
we're at the end of the program, so
Okay.
here's an opportunity for you to look into the camera and tell everybody, women in the audience and the men in the audience too, where they can go to learn more about Presence
Well-
Intelligence. It's camera on the left.
Sure, Presence Intelligence is easy to find. It's presenceintelligence.com. And to reach me, I am impromptu friendly, so lisa@presenceintelligence.com.
And a great opportunity to start a conversation with Lisa. I know you're very
Yes.
forthcoming about that. And
Yes.
in just a half-hour conversation with Lisa, you can learn a lot, I think. And Presence Intelligence is definitely something. If you're a coach, it's something you'll want to learn about because it could be something you can build into your repertoire of services.
Yep, it's good for professionals and personals.
It's great.
All right.
Lisa Manyoky, it's
Thank you.
always a pleasure co-hosting The Advocates with you, and great having you on as a guest, especially for the special day of women in business. So thanks for joining us.
My
And,
pleasure.
really great.
pleasure.
And thanks all of you for tuning into this episode. And we'll see you again on Wednesday at 10 o'clock for another of The Advocates. Until then, thanks very much for watching, and take care and have a great day.